There was a time when you could take this very Ferris wheel all the way to the top, where you'd look down and see kids playing games at the midway. You might hear the distant rattle of a roller coaster, music bleeding out of a ballroom just down the hill, and the smell of funnel cakes and lake water filling the warm summer air. But now, it's barely a memory. How does a place that was once so full of life get swallowed whole by Mother Nature? With my self-worth on the line from the mistakes of my last video, it was time to prove to the haters once and for all that I'm very capable of thinking ahead and grabbing gas before I get on the road. It's not often that you can make a documentary about something that existed in a different century and also living to have seen it for yourself. And while I couldn't see this place in its prime, that's not going to stop me from appreciating the state of decay that Chippewa Lake Park currently sits in, like some sort of alien planet. But when I got here, I noticed immediately that there was a fence lining the entire perimeter of where this park supposedly was. Every single step I took that was closer to that fence, I felt some crazy sensation like somebody was in their house with binoculars waiting for me to make that final step in the wrong direction. But instead, I packed up my curiosity and took it on over to the public pier, where I decided to go for a walk along the shore of Chippewa Lake. And it didn't take long for me to realize that this side of the perimeter had little to no fencing whatsoever. This is insane. Are you kidding me? There's literally a tree growing through these tracks. Oh my gosh. That is insane. Look at the way the sun's hitting this part of the track. Oh, it's gorgeous. I was standing in the bones of the Little Dipper, a kid's coaster that had once been bright and probably where a lot of kids got their first taste of adrenaline, and now it was just rusting into the ground. Oh my gosh. As I got closer to this thing, I started to realize there were no seats left on the Ferris wheel. It was just the frame itself. That was all that was standing of this thing. Vines coming from every direction, pulling this thing back into the earth. The amount of trees that were growing through this thing was insane. It was like nature itself was trying to preserve something made by humans. And to think that at one point in time, this thing was spinning with kids on it, going on dates, parents pointing at the lake views and hearing music playing below you, and now it was just completely silent, and not even the windiest day could cause this thing to creak. But in order to truly understand how the park got to this state of decay, we're gonna have to go back to the very beginning. Before the rides, roller coasters, and cotton candy summers, this was just a lake and a man with an idea, and his name was Edward Andrews. In 1875, he opened what would be called Andrews Pleasure Grounds. All the words in the English dictionary, and you go with, okay. Edwards wanted to create a resort where the good people would have access to amenities such as the beach, a hotel, a restaurant, and a picnic area. The kind of place you'd bring a packed lunch and spend the whole day doing absolutely nothing. The whole thing was simple, but it just worked. In the earliest stages of Chippewa Lake Park, your experience came down to who you spent your time with here. You really had to double down on your own company. But at some point, Andrews would add a little steamboat to go around the lake in, and he even built this early style roller coaster, if you could really even call it that. At the time, it was simply a wooden chute with a cart that the staff would have to push back to the very top after every single ride. By the early 1900s, a guy named Mac Beach would come in and take the wheel. He cleaned up the place, but he cut out booze, and he leaned hard into the whole family-friendly vibe. But Mac was just getting started because he went on to purchase the Lafayette Township Resort, which allowed him to take apart the current ballroom and replace it with the Starlight Ballroom, featuring plenty of seating, a gigantic dance floor, and a refreshment bar. How could things possibly get any better than growing up on the grounds of Chippewa Lake Park? Parker, the son of Mac Beach, would take over and bring in the park's very first roller coaster, known as the Big Dipper. A wooden beast that stood about 50 feet tall. And I know that might not sound like much now, but back then, that was serious business. The kind of thing you go to school the next day and tell your friends and hope they got red in the face. And just like that, the park started to grow. More rides, more music, more people. What began as a little lakeside picnic spot was quickly evolving into something way bigger. Families from Cleveland, Akron, and all over northeastern Ohio started making it their go-to summer spot. And for a while, it worked. It really worked.
Step right up and win a prize for the lady here. Step right up. Step right up and win a prize for your lady. What do you say? Come on up.
Kids used to blow their entire allowances at the Midway games. All the while, their parents would be sitting in the shade sipping on lemonade. The sounds might be my favorite part, because you got the tumblebug rattling around in circles, you got the wild mouse that's whipping through turns that felt way too sharp, but then you got bumper cars slamming into each other while some teenager that works there gets on the intercom and half-heartedly yells, "No head-on collisions." It was loud and messy, but it was perfect. But here's something that I found really cool. If you were from Medina County, you lived for Nickel Day. A day every spring when schools would let out early and every ride in the park cost 5 cents. I don't know whether to be jealous more of the cheap rides or the fact that schools literally let out early for an amusement park's promotion. Like, that is insane to me. If you or anybody that you know participated in Nickel Day, I would love to know more about that, so drop that story in the comments. There's just something about places like this. It didn't matter who you were, the park made room for you, for your family, your friends, and especially your firsts. And after a long time, it really did feel like this place just might last forever. And honestly, I think about this a lot because growing up, my family had our own version of this. We went to Kings Island every summer. It wasn't optional, it was tradition. Me, my brother, my sister, the whole crew. And when you're a kid, you think those trips will last forever too, but life doesn't always work that way. My brother's unfortunately gone now, but every summer we still go, not because it's easy, but because this place matters to us. There's just some places that hold pieces of the people you lost, and walking through them kind of makes you feel like they're somehow still there, laughing and riding coasters with you. But even though some places on Earth can truly feel eternal, they aren't.
Welcome to Cedar Point.
By the 1970s, the world around Chippewa Lake Park had changed. New parks were rising, bigger, flashier, corporate-backed juggernauts with massive steel coasters and national ad campaigns. Cedar Point and Kings Island were booming. Even Gouger Lake, just an hour away, was expanding pretty fast. But Chippewa, it was still beloved, still familiar, but it felt old now. And in 1969, the Beach family sold the park to a company called Continental Business Enterprises. The idea was to modernize it, turn it into a full-blown resort maybe. It was ambitious, but that vision never really materialized. The funding just never got there, so crowds never returned. And behind the scenes, it was getting harder and harder to maintain. In the year 1978, a full 100 years since the park's first grand opening, Chippewa Lake would have to close its doors forever. They say this land might open again someday. Maybe not with coasters or cotton candy, but with trails and trees and quiet paths where you can still hear the echoes if you really listen.